internet, you had to do what you could. Terrible. You can play this on a browser as well, but this is one of the things I would advise, don't waste your time. It is so bad, it's untrue. And these sort of attempts at intersectionality here failed miserably to a large extent. Only when cinematic techniques were brought into a game structure did this start to work properly. We see that with sort of mid-development in the PlayStation 1 era, where you start to see extensive use of cinematic technique within the storytelling of a game. In particular, the key game for that would be Metal Gear Solid 1, which brought in long, extensive cutscenes in order to tell a particular story. So, Arki Yarvanen. Emotion in games is linked to particular pleasures offered by what he calls staged pretense. There is choice, but it's limited. The choices are made for us. And game systems elicit emotions from players and lead them to predict their and other players' future emotions during the game based on these choices. And he uses the example in this writing of sports games, where you get emotional responses, especially in a multiplayer environment, on the basis of these are the things that are going to happen to me playing this game and these other people playing this game at this time. Doesn't just apply here, I don't think. When our emotional aspect of playing games is projected across the timescale of how long we play. At the point that we are feeling a particular emotion, we are very often predicting what will become of our character and reflecting on what kind of character development has occurred over that period of time as well. So games use temporality in really interesting ways to project forwards and backwards in order to draw in. Even games which are simpler, you think of Resident Evil 2, as you were talking about. The initial, and I think one of the things that actually Resident Evil 2 tapped into, which the first one didn't back in the day, was setting up the story of the characters in the first 5 minutes. So you've got that, Leon goes to the petrol station, and you get in that cinematic cutscene a whole thing about why he's in Raccoon City, what he's doing there, what's the purpose of this. Same with Claire. And it develops a sense of characterization of them, and then from that point onwards, right, you have the past given to you. You have a story. Last of Us does it masterfully with its characters, that you do have a sense that these are characters that have a past, where the difference perhaps lies with those sort of horror games. I know Last of Us isn't really considered that, but it is. The future is put onto you. Leon has no future unless you get him out of this situation. Hell of a lot of people in Last of Us have no future unless you do this sort of thing. So you are always, those sort of games are so effective for me because they create a past and problematize what the future is going to be because it's in peril, right? There is no future for this character, and you then feel an ownership of the emotional tenor of the game and the character itself because it's all on you. If you don't do well, if you don't perform, there is no future for this character. Spoiler alert, there is no character. It's just a bunch of pixels. It doesn't exist, but these things exist emotionally for us. Sims is brilliant at that. Where you latch on to a sim, and like Jess, you're quite happily killing all the rest. But this one, you want to see it flourish in some sort of way, and as I said, this background here is Papers, Please. I do encourage people to give it a go. And some of the things, so some vaccination entry permits, passport pictures. Sid Meier, I've used this quote previously. A good game is a series of interesting choices. When we are presented with a game that we enjoy, we are given choices which actually hold our interest. Really boring, in particular, badly made RPG games are characterized by having choices that you couldn't care less about. I could do this or I could do that. was a whole generation of games in the 90s that tried to be Zelda. And it just, you know, literally copied Zelda, just didn't have Link as the character, so something else as character. And some did it well, but most did it really badly, because the actual choices that you were presented with were just, I don't care. I don't care if I go this way or that way. You've done nothing to invest me in this. There was no interest in choice to be made. One of the core strategies and strengths of a lot of Nintendo games, weirdly, but the Zelda series in particular, is that they focus on making you make choices which you're actually invested in. And those forks in the game, fixed choices though they are, you can do one or the other very often, but there's something that you think, okay, if I do this, this will happen. You're instantly engaged in projecting forwards and predicting what could happen to your character. Whereas badly made games, you don't feel, you know, I don't care what happens to my character, you know, this could happen or that could happen. So I agree with Mayer to an extent that, you know, I don't think this is the only element, actually, that makes a good game, but I think it's a very important element that making these particular choices is a really, you know, and if the designer includes choices which are actually interesting, the game itself will be interesting because of it, and will therefore be more likely to invest us in motions. So actions with consequences in particular really do set up the possibility of having emotional response to games. Again, think again of Red Dead Redemption 2, which makes really effective use of the honor system. So the choices that you make are invested with, you know, is this an honourable thing to do? And then it affects how the game ends, effectively, how honourable you are. If you're a piece of shit, you get a considerably different death at the end of the game than if you're an honourable person. And you get all sorts of different cutscenes, music. Actually the epilogue to the game is different in its tenor as well. When you meet people and you're spoken about as your character, that's all different. So all of this helps us emotionally invest in what's going on in the game. Ultimately, all our choices that we make in games are just like the choices we make in everyday life. They're integrally tied to our goals, our decisions, and consequences. There are a subset of people in everyday life who don't think of the consequences of their actions. I'm sure you know people like this. Yeah? They're not good people, usually. They're fairly destructive, borderline sociopathic or psychotic at that point. If you can't understand that your actions have consequences, it's pretty destructive. It's a very destructive way of doing things. Game designers know this. So they look to develop emotional sort of response in us. There's a million hours of footage of, you know, any of the games that we've decided that, you know, the people are talking about, like Uncharted, for example, or Red Dead, or something like this, where people make decisions in those games which they don't care for the consequences of. And they're very funny. You know, things like that are extremely funny. Like, one of my favourite things to do in Red Dead Redemption 2 is to hog-tie a non-playable character, carry them to the railroad tracks, and watch them get run over. Now, if you do that to a woman in the game, spoiler for those of you who play it, you will get a gold trophy.
What?
Oh yeah. Not if you do it to a man. It's not as fun doing that as hog tying them to and then using a piece of rope to tie them to the back of a train and then watching them fly about when the train leaves. That's much more fun. They're like a demented kite that screams. The consequences of... Do I feel guilt about this? No, I can't say I do, to be honest. But if it was an emotionally important character in the game, I almost certainly would. If this was a significant character in the game that my character had interactions with, I probably wouldn't hog-tie them to a train or allow them to get run. Probably. I can't promise that, but you know, there's a probability to it. The most significant, I mean, these are just things you do in these games when you get bored, right? You know, sometimes we play through things in open world environments and it's like, I'm really bored now, I'm just gonna shoot. It's the first instance of doing this, I guess, is in a big way is World of Warcraft, where people just started slaughtering pigs for no I mean, you get points for doing it, very few. And it was like the discovery of how you grind XP, but like this basically came from people who got bored of doing stuff and just went off and just started slaughtering pigs, and you think that's not good. I mean that's there with like young kids who kill little animals. That's pretty awful. I labour the point. Goals, decisions, consequences. It is that nexus that drives emotional content. What are our goals? What decisions do we make? What consequences are there? Just as in everyday life. I mean, you again all know people who have no goals. They suck. I mean, they're shitless layabouts at the end of the day. I mean, I'm not exactly dynamic, but I have some goals at least. Many of them will revolve around drinking, but the goals nevertheless. So, this is not good. Can we take a few minutes and then I should be able to get through by 12 o'clock. I see Eve just wanted to go.
I need the toilet.
Can I show you the article that I found?